my presentation is coming from very much from the other end of the spectrum to Kellyanne, because all of my work is with post-16 students in further education colleges in the southeast of Kent in the UK. So there's a significant difference not only in age but in young person's development and so on. So there are differences, but the application of the title, Strategies to Meet Multiple Needs, you will see, well, I think you'll see that there's some synergy. So, so it's within this UK FE context that I'm referencing the topic, and I'm hoping that you will see that there is some synergy with, certainly with what has been said in our earlier presentations and introductions prior to us going into breakout rooms, but also to your own experience. Okay, so in my experience with nursery and primary education, the primary and nursery education meet the needs of young people, young children very well. There is a significant gap in how well the needs of children are met in secondary and tertiary education. And this, I'm sure, is due to many factors: structure of the education system, being a qualification-driven curriculum, expectations of teachers and deadlines to deliver, and no doubt many other factors. In the UK, in further education, vocational lecturers will be recruited from industry with no requirement to be teacher trained. So that sort of sets the backdrop for some of the things I'm going to be saying. So to expect that teachers undertake teacher training and also understand the concept of all teachers are teachers of SEND is a significant journey. The 3 tiers of teaching and support, the graphic that you can see on the screen, sets the scene for teachers of the volume of needs presented in their classes at the universal level. Teachers need to learn the skills to teach to meet the needs of all of their students, which of course was one of the points that Kellyanne was making. Yeah, and we want all of our teachers to deliver inspirational, inclusive, purposeful education that enables our young people to achieve their ambition. Well, for teachers to change their planning and delivery of teaching, they need to understand why. What difference will it make? What's the moral purpose? And it's often the moral purpose behind change, which is actually what informs the why. Why am I doing this? Why do I need to change? And a significant number of students who don't engage or drop out of education have got learning needs: ADHD, autism, SEM, social emotional mental health needs, dyslexia, and that's a point that Daniel Sabel spoke about. The impact on the life chances for these young people and their families is significant for those that don't engage. So there is a moral purpose. Can we say a moral duty? Perhaps we can, on teachers, and education leaders need to challenge processes and make changes to be more inclusive and enabling. We need to move from an add-on or extra to universal, enabling, inclusive delivery of teaching, which very much includes planning of teaching as well as the delivery. So the common ground for many of our students, we actually need to teach them to learn. Teaching to learn is integral to teaching the subject. Teaching to learn is requires some planning and thinking on behalf of our teachers. So just some of the common areas in which students with neurodiverse conditions are challenged is and often these strategies actually overlap with the key points, and the 4 key points that I've put on the screen: memory, abstract concepts, attention, change, flexibility. There are other points which are common to the needs of young people, the neurodiverse young people. So pre and post learning and breaking topics into chunks can support students to remember the topics that's being taught. Use real examples, avoid abstract examples, rephrase and use graphics and diagrams to support text. We have many young people who are, well, working at all levels within the provision, the further education provision in which where I work, who actually need to have pointers, they need graphics, they can't cope with lots of text, and young people who are working at universal HE level who need support to access the resources and the topics that are being taught. Many of our students find it quite difficult to focus, and we often presume as teachers that by the end of primary education that our students know how to conform to the norm of the class, norm of the class expectations, what to do when they come into the room, that they know what the routine is. But many students have lots of different teachers teaching them lots of different subjects. And different teachers will have different routines, different ways of working, and presume that their students will all know what's expected of them with all of in all of the classes and with all the teachers who are teaching them. So for many of our students, attention to task is really challenging, and it helps to repeat, reinforce, summarise, and keep the task short so that it's actually manageable. For many who find the change in routine challenging, establishing a routine and a pattern to the class, to the layout of the room, can minimise anxiety. So these are just some strategies to teach students how to learn. And what is, of course, good practice for the neurodiverse is good practice for all students. And I don't think we always consider that many of our students actually find coming into a room, a classroom, challenging. So, and we've got some students who will actually need to have different tools, different resources, but the actual structure and the layout of the room and the organisation of how that class works can minimise anxiety and prepare students for what's coming. Okay, so let's just look at real hands-on in the classroom tools for teachers to enable their students to become independent learners. This is an idea. So in one of our colleges where I work, each teacher has been given a box with a host of tools for students to use. And at 16 years, students really can start to understand their own needs, their own condition, and to take responsibility for meeting their needs. But we can't presume that that's just going to be a quick conversation. I understand you're on the autistic spectrum and you find this and this challenging. We actually need to teach young people to understand their condition. And this is about teaching young people the skills for life, for going into the workplace. And so the toolbox, inclusive toolbox, this has got a range of tools in it. Some are fun things, but very practical, and tools that young people can use to learn to meet their needs and to take responsibility and to become more independent. So instead of the support in the room or the teacher every time handing out the orange coloured worksheet or the coloured overlay for the young person who has Erlands, then we might do that once or twice. Then we expect the student to actually get that resource themselves, because if they don't have that overlay, they won't be reading the text, the worksheet. They won't be able to participate. That needs to be an understanding that they become more independent and get that themselves. So the student who is quite disruptive, is fiddly, the pen is tapping on the table, then how about using fidget strings or similar? Doesn't have to be the fidget strings if that's going to go flying across the room. A squeezy ball or alternative. Quite sort of traditionally, I think we've tended to think that if someone's doing a lot of twitching, a lot of tapping, we tell them as the teacher, stop. Or we might go up close and we might give them a sign. But actually, that fidget string can make a difference. That fidget ball actually can make the difference between and enabling that young person to focus. For the student who's challenged with fine motor control, a grip pen may well help. Actually might mean that they can write and take part and we can read their writing. So these are just a few examples of some of the things that might be in the inclusion box. What is key is that what's in the inclusion box is actually going to be an enabler resource for the young people who are in that class. Some students, in fact, many have sensory needs, may well need to wear headphones to block out that very slight buzzing which the rest of us filter out. I think it's quite traditional where we've said, well, no wearing headphones in class. That's one of our rules. If you're wearing headphones, you could well be listening to music. You might well be listening to stuff and you're not focusing on what's being taught. But for some students, it actually makes the difference between them being able to engage, hear and learn and not be distracted by the sound of the buzzing and what's going on somewhere else. So there is a purpose behind the inclusion box with regards to teaching responsibility and independence, teaching young people to understand their self and their own needs, and with regards to teaching about change. Now, this isn't in the inclusion box, but I'm referencing my earlier point here, is about teaching young people about change. And yes, we start with a routine and a pattern that young people become familiar with in the class and learn, because they know that they're not going to be having to work on that worksheet for an hour until it's completely finished. Actually, working on the worksheet might be a 10 or a 15-minute task, then we move on. But the extension to that and teaching about change is a reality for all of us in whatever we do. And for young people who find change difficult, we also need to teach that change happens, and these are the skills and these are what we need to become used to. So for the inclusion box to be used by teachers, teachers need to know why, because otherwise that inclusion box isn't going to come out the cupboard. They need to know what their students' needs are and need to understand that they can enable their students to engage and learn through using the resources in the box that meet their particular needs. And without that understanding of why and how that resource can be, is a purposeful resource for staff, and it has real meaning behind it, staff need to know who their young people are and what their needs are, and that's that bit of homework before the teaching ever begins. And I'll just finish with the point here that it's the gift of teachers to meet the needs of all students. So I'll give to challenge systems to affect a young person's experience. And Albert Einstein had a great quote here, that everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid. So